Hi guys, this is the video to tell you how to do an oral presentation. And I'm going to try to make it short, but I could talk a long time about this because I think it's so important to put a lot of thought into this. You're not just explaining what you found out, you are creating something, a meaningful piece of work, right? You're trying to communicate with people. And you're trying to interest people. You're trying to explain to people why this is important or why it's interesting. That's the most important thing. Don't try to bore us with details. Imagine that we are a general audience. We don't know very much about your topic. We know a little bit about biology, but you have to try to convince us that this is something interesting and important. That's your job, right? So you have to be a bit of an artist, a bit of a performer, and at the same time be faithful to the science that you're trying to communicate. So you have to think about what's the interesting part. You only have 5 minutes, right? So what's the most interesting thing about this question or my findings that I want to communicate to these people? Don't include everything. That's a big thing, right? People can ask questions later if they're interested, but make an interesting story. Tell an interesting story. So that's the piece of advice I always give to my students is tell a story. Where's the story? How could you make it interesting? Okay, so that's overall my biggest piece of advice. But in terms of specifically this assignment, what about visuals, right? I said they're not mandatory, but in general, we're highly visual people. Now, unfortunately, you're doing this by video and not in person because we didn't have time for everyone to do their presentations for the whole class. And so you've got this competing screen. You want to be present on the screen. You want people to be listening to you, but you also want to show them interesting things because humans are visual. They like looking at nice pictures. So you have to use visuals that are useful and interesting, not random, useful and interesting and simple. Don't put a ton of text. Don't put your text on the screen. You are going to be telling us what you want to say. You're not going to force us to read it. So don't put text on the screen unless it's just like a couple of words. Don't make your slides too busy. We can really only take in one concept at a time. Make it big. So one slide, one big concept, one big picture or graph. If you put it on the screen, you have to talk about it, right? You just can't have stuff happening in the background and not even refer to it on the screen. You have to refer to it. Okay, so those are my big 3 things. Number 1, don't put your text on the screen. Number 2, one idea per slide, make it big, make it visually interesting. And 3, you have to talk about it if it's going on the screen. By far the most biggest problem my students have is they put way too much on each slide. And it's like the audience is like, try and figure out what's important, what they should be looking at, what they should be reading instead of listening to the speaker. So you want to make sure that your visuals enhance your talk, not distract from your talk. And make it interesting. You're trying to get people interested in this, right? Make it interesting. Consider your audience. Consider what you would like, right? I'm sure you guys have been to really boring science talks. Don't do one of those. Make it interesting, right? And don't read from a script. I want you to rehearse it. I want you to know pretty much what you're going to say. And maybe if you're good at reading notes, you can read from a script and I won't even know about it. I mean, some people are really good at that, but it's a rare skill set that probably needs a lot of time to develop. In general, I find people better off not reading from a script, but that requires practice. Okay, so yeah, good luck. Make it a story, make it interesting, and I think you'll be okay if you do those things. Good luck.